Just days after Britain shivered through its coldest May night in 5 years, with temperatures crashing to minus 6.1 degrees Celsius and frost covering windscreens from the Scottish Highlands all the way down to Cumbria, the weather maps have flipped completely. Orange has replaced blue. Heat has replaced frost. Forecasters are now pointing at a specific window, May 19th and 20. When a surge of warm air is set to push temperatures up to 25 degrees Celsius across England and Wales, covering 34 counties simultaneously. That swing, from minus 6 to plus 25, inside the same month of May, is the kind of weather story that would have seemed completely impossible to the generation that grew up with Britain's old climate. But this is 2026, and the weather map does not lie. The data behind this mini heat wave is real, it is fresh, and it comes from some of the most respected modeling systems in the world. Weather charts from wxcharts.com, one of the primary modeling tools used by professional forecasters across the UK, show the entire country warming significantly on May 19th and 20, from the very top of Scotland right down to the tip of Cornwall. This is not a southern England story. This is a nationwide shift in temperature that will be felt from the central belt of Scotland to the beaches of the south coast. The ECMWF model, the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, widely regarded as the world's most accurate medium-range weather forecasting system, has confirmed the picture. It shows temperatures in southeast England reaching 23 degrees Celsius on May 19th, rising further to 25 degrees Celsius in and around London by May 20th. The south coast is forecast to reach 24 degrees on that date. Heat of 20 degrees or above is projected to stretch as far north as Yorkshire and Cheshire. Even parts of South Wales are expected to see 21 degrees during the peak of this warm spell. That is not a localized warm spell in one corner of England. That is a blanket of heat arriving across a country that, within the same month, was recording frost and ice. So which 34 counties are actually going to feel this heat? The picture that emerges from the WX charts and ECMWF modeling data covers the full geographical spread of England and significant parts of Wales. Starting in the south, the counties sitting directly in the path of the warmest air include Kent, Surrey, Greater London, Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, East Sussex, West Sussex, and Hampshire, the traditional heartland of English summer heat, where proximity to the continent and low elevation allow temperatures to build rapidly when warm air pushes northward from France and the Iberian Peninsula. Further inland, Berkshire, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and Northamptonshire are all expected to reach 20 degrees or above during the peak days. The Midlands, Birmingham, Nottingham, and Leicester are forecast to see temperature peaks ranging from 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, which for that region at this point in May represents a significant and genuinely warm spell. Moving further north, Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Staffordshire, Warwickshire, Worcestershire, Gloucestershire, and Hertfordshire all feature in the modeling as areas expected to cross or closely approach the 20-degree threshold. Lancashire, Cheshire, Merseyside, and Greater Manchester, cities that spent the past week scraping frost, are forecast to reach 18 degrees Celsius. Newcastle and York, sitting further north still, are projected at around 15 degrees during the warmest period. Parts of South Wales, including areas of the southern valleys, are also expected to see 21 degrees Celsius under favorable conditions. The context in which this mini heat wave is arriving makes it significantly more interesting than just a pleasant spring warm spell. Britain has had an extraordinarily volatile May so far in 2026, and the temperature story of this month has been unlike anything most people can recall experiencing within a single 31-day period. Just days before the warm surge arrived, the Met Office recorded a national low of minus 6.1 degrees Celsius at Altnahara, in the Scottish Highlands, the coldest night in the country since May 2021. Sub-zero readings were also confirmed at Shap in Cumbria and at Castlederg in County Tyrone. Met Office spokeswoman Nicola Maxey described those temperatures as lower than typically expected for the time of year. And yet, almost simultaneously with that cold snap, the data was already signaling the warm surge that is now bearing down on the country. This is not normal seasonal variability. This is a climate system under stress, producing extremes at both ends of the scale in rapid succession, with very little transition time between them. What is driving the warm spell arriving around May 19th and 20 is the breakdown of the cold, continental air mass that produced the May frost, and its replacement by a much warmer southerly flow originating from the Iberian Peninsula and northwest France. When atmospheric pressure builds over the continent and southerly or southeasterly winds establish themselves over England, warm air is essentially dragged northward along the surface. London and the southeast sit in exactly the right position to capture the leading edge of that warm flow before it mixes with cooler North Sea air further north. That is why the temperature gradient across England during this event is so pronounced. 25 degrees in London, 20 degrees in Yorkshire, 15 degrees in Newcastle. The same air mass arriving at different points along its journey northward, progressively cooling as it travels, but still delivering warmth that is well above the seasonal average across the entire country. The average temperature for mid-May across the UK is approximately 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. The readings projected for the 19th and 20th represent an anomaly of between 6 and 11 degrees above that baseline, depending on location. It is worth understanding what 25 degrees Celsius in May actually means for the people of Britain, because there is a tendency in British weather coverage to use the word heatwave loosely. In meteorological terms, a genuine heatwave requires temperatures to meet or exceed specific county-level thresholds for at least 3 consecutive days. In southeast England, that threshold is 28 degrees Celsius. In the Midlands, it is 25 degrees. The warm spell arriving on May 19th and 20 is likely to fall just short of the formal 3-day heatwave definition in most areas. Or hence the use of the phrase mini-heatwave by forecasters, which is entirely accurate. But do not let the word mini mislead you. 25 degrees in London in mid-May is a genuinely warm day by any standard. It is hotter than many days in July would have been in Britain 30 years ago. It represents conditions under which UV exposure is significant, where people who are unprepared can get sunburned in under an hour, and where vulnerable groups, the elderly, those with respiratory conditions, young children, need to take basic precautions around hydration and sun exposure. The broader significance of this warm spell is not just what it feels like on May 19th and 20. It is what it signals about the trajectory of the summer that is coming. The Met Office's latest 3-month outlook, published at the start of May 2026, placed a 40% probability on a hot summer continuing through July, double the standard background odds. That is the official position of the UK's National Meteorological Service, not a tabloid weather forecast. And crucially, the mini-heatwave arriving around May 19th and 20 is consistent with the early warm spells that have historically preceded the most intense British summers on record. In the spring before the record-breaking heatwave of July 2022, Britain experienced multiple warm spells in May that raised temperatures across southern England to the low to mid-20s. Those warm episodes, while pleasant and seemingly unremarkable at the time, were part of the atmospheric setup that eventually allowed temperatures to reach 40.3 degrees Celsius at Coningsby in Lincolnshire in July. The pattern of warm incursions establishing themselves earlier and earlier in the season is one of the clearest signals in the UK temperature record that a summer of significant heat is building. Looking at the forecasting models beyond the immediate May 19th and 20th window, the picture for late May and into June is also notable. WX charts data and the ECMWF seasonal guidance both suggest that after a brief cooler interlude following the mini heatwave, temperatures are likely to rise again toward the end of the month. Some modeling scenarios are pointing toward 30-degree temperatures arriving in southern England before June is out, with GB News reporting that independent forecasters are already describing Britain as potentially weeks away from its first 30-degree-plus heatwave of the year. The Met Office has not confirmed specific dates for further heat events beyond the immediate forecast window, as is standard practice, but its 3-month probabilistic guidance consistently places above-average temperatures as the most likely outcome across the whole of the summer period. That guidance, combined with the developing El Niño signal in the Pacific and the already elevated global ocean temperatures, creates a summer risk profile unlike anything seen in recent years. The specific weather systems responsible for the UK's May volatility are also worth understanding, because they explain why Britain keeps flipping between extremes so rapidly in 2026. The cold snap earlier this month was driven by a blocking high-pressure system over Scandinavia that dragged Arctic air southward across the UK. Clear skies associated with that high-pressure system allowed temperatures to crash overnight without any cloud cover to trap surface heat. The warm spell arriving on May 19th and 20 is being driven by the opposite configuration, a southerly flow establishing itself as the Scandinavian block retreats eastward and allows a warmer air mass from the continent to push north. The North Atlantic jet stream, which normally acts as a boundary between cold polar air and warm subtropical air, has been behaving erratically in 2026 in ways that are increasingly consistent with climate-driven disruption of normal atmospheric circulation patterns. When the jet stream weakens or amplifies in unusual ways, it creates the conditions for these dramatic temperature swings, and multiple independent researchers have linked jet stream irregularity to the kind of rapid warming seen in the Arctic over the past 2 decades. For people across the 34 counties now in the path of this mini heatwave, the practical message is the same whether you are in central London or coastal Yorkshire. Make the most of it, but be prepared. Temperatures of 20 to 25 degrees in May arrive alongside UV radiation levels that are already high enough to cause skin damage, particularly during the peak hours of 11 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. The Met Office regularly issues UV warnings during spring warm spells that most people ignore, assuming that because the air does not feel hot, the sun cannot burn. It can. UV levels in southern England during a clear sky May day at 25 degrees are comparable to those in many Mediterranean destinations. Sun cream, shade, and hydration are not optional extras for a summer holiday. They are basic responses to conditions that are genuinely capable of causing harm to unprepared skin and unprepared bodies. It is also important to note what happens to British infrastructure during warm spells that arrive suddenly, without warning, after cold weather. The rail network is one of the most exposed systems in the country during rapid temperature changes. When tracks that have been sitting in near-freezing temperatures for days are suddenly exposed to temperatures in the mid-20s, the rate of thermal expansion is faster and more uneven than it would be during a gradual seasonal warm-up. Network Rail has been monitoring these conditions closely, and passengers on long-distance routes through southern England and the Midlands are advised to check for any speed restrictions or service amendments that may be put in place during the warmest days of the May 19th and 20th period. Beyond rail, the sudden shift toward warm weather also puts immediate pressure on healthcare services. Emergency departments consistently see a rise in presentations related to dehydration, heat exhaustion, sunburn, and alcohol-related incidents during the first warm spell of any year, because people who have not acclimatized to warm temperatures underestimate how quickly the body loses water, and how significantly alcohol accelerates that process when temperatures are elevated. The NHS has consistently advised that the first warm weekend of any spring or summer season is one of the most dangerous from a public health perspective, precisely because the body has not yet adjusted to heat after a cold period. This May, with the cold snap of the first week giving way to 25-degree temperatures by the third week, that risk is particularly acute. There is a wider story visible behind the orange maps and the pleasant temperature numbers. The mini-heatwave arriving on May 19th and 20 is not the story. It is a chapter in a much longer story about what the British climate has already become and where it is going. Britain recorded its coldest May night in 5 years at the start of this month. Now it is looking at temperatures approaching 25 degrees 2 weeks later. The summer ahead carries a 40% probability of sustained heat through July, according to the Met Office. A super El Niño is forming in the Pacific. Global temperatures are running at the highest levels ever recorded in human history. And the preliminary forecasts for summer 2026 place multiple heat waves as the likely, not the possible, outcome for the UK. The orange on the weather map is warm and pleasant today. By July and August, if the models are right, the colors on those maps may tell a very different and much more urgent story.